But while Nancy and Elphin kept their vigil, what dreams there were in Glastonbury! Dreams without any beginning, as they were without any end. For whoever began a dream, people always find themselves immersed in the middle of some dream or other. The essence of sleep does not lie in dreaming. It lies in a certain dying to the surface life and sinking down into the life under the surface, where the other life, healing and refreshing, exists like an immortal tide of fresh water flowing beneath the salt water of a turbid sea. It is sufficient to remember the lovely and mysterious feeling of falling asleep compared with the crude, raw, iron spikes of the unpleasant things that happen in dreams to realize the difference. Between the process of going to sleep and the process of dreaming exists a great gulf. They seem to belong to different categories of being. But, however this may be, the fact remains that upon a certain night in the year, when the tide of Burnham begins to rise with a weird persistence, the sleep of Glastonbury is a troubled one. The sturdy northeastern invaders, the ancestors of Philip and John, beat back more than Mr. Evans's people when they swept the Celts in South Wales. They beat back with them their thermatic demigods. The living corpse, for instance, of Uther Pendragon, the mysterious Urien, king of Ur Ichwyd, the land of glamour and illusion, the land whose vapors are always livid blue, that mystic color named by the bards Gossamer, and Arwen, king of Ernwyn. They beat back, together with those weird protectors of the heathen Grail, the fisher king Petshir, and the maimed king Pellis. All these beings, so many of whom seem to recede and vanish away, even as they are named among us, like creatures of a blundered incarnation, had the ancestors of Philip and John and the ancestors of Dave driven back westward. And along with Mr. Evans's people, and their dark Chthonian gods, these healthy-minded invaders had driven back the very dreams of these Cymric and Byrothonic tribes. For today it was Mr. Evans and Mr. Geard, Mrs. Geard, and Blackie Morgan, together with the impoverished and mutinous population of the slums, whose Holocaust Philip had seen the night in the artistic pictures of his red coals, who were the true aboriginals, and the larger part of their blood, like that of the old lake village dwellers, was both pre-Celtic and prehistoric. So that on this night of all nights, this night of the 10th of December, a date that always, every year, only none but the witched wives of Bovetown and Paradise knew about this, was a significant date for Glastonbury. What really came back upon this terrific wind, blowing up out of the Western Sea and the Western Isles, were the dreams of the conquered, those discorded, extravagant, law-breaking dreams out of which the shrines of Glastonbury had originally been built. Nancy Stickles was perfectly right when she whispered to the darkness, as her white breast expanded under her black shawl in response to the wind, "What a thing sleep is, to be in the world." It was only upon these happy heads that did not dream, however, that the true mystery of sleep, carrying those carefree foreheads deep down under the sacred waters of Ur Ichwyd, really descended. Such was the privilege that night of both Lady Rachel and Miss Elizabeth Crowe. Such was the privilege of Mr. Wallop and the Burt Cole. Such was the privilege of young Toosey, of Titty Petherton and Tilly Crowe, of Penny Pitches, and of old Abel Twig. Among the others, the eternal contest went on, as it had gone on for at least 5,000 years, between the friends of the Grail, that fragment of beyond time fallen through the crack of the world ceiling under the time floor, and its deadly enemies. The Grail had come to be the magnet gatherer of all the religious that had ever come into Glastonbury. A piece of the absolute had attracted these various cults to itself with an indifference as to their divergency from one another that was almost cruel. Thus, the instinct in Philip and John that drove their souls forth tonight to go grail-killing was as blind and overpowering as that which drove Pellinore to pursue his questing beast. Neither Nancy nor Elfin, these watchers at windows, at the back of High Street and Cattle Market, were aware of this great melee of warring dreams, tossing and heaving, with the gun fallen up the Grail on one side, and on the other the ardent flame of reason. Whirled about in that rushing wind, which kept eddying and ricocheting among the three Glastonbury hills, drifted those opposed dream hosts. Every dreamer under these diverse roofs, from the slate-tiled elms where Philly lay in his stuffy broom, to the draughty stables loft at St. Michael's, where Sally Lou slept in his tipsy sleep, was forced, that 10th of December, to mingle his own private dream with the great nocturnal tourney. John Crow dreamed that they found the Grail on Chalice Hill, founded in the earth about 6 feet north of the well. But when it was found, all the people present turned into a flock of starlings and flew away, leaving only himself and the philosophic wood louse he had imagined encountering the human louse of the woman with cancer. And he himself was now seized with a frantic necessity to make water, and yet he knew that if he made water on the earth, that woodlouse would be drowned. So John Crow made water into the Holy Grail. When he had finished this blasphemous sacrilege, he observed that the woodlouse had crawled to the rim of the vessel. "What are you going to do?" John cried in terror. "Drown myself," replied the louse. But if that wild wind out of the west disturbed the dreams of men, it did not prove less disturbing to the dreams of women. Persephone dreamed that green leaves were growing out of her feet and out of her shoulders, and that she was standing stark naked in the center of a group of silver-barked birch trees, who were all, like herself, slim, naked girls, with green leaves growing out of their heads and green leaves growing out of their feet. Near this group, where Persephone was standing, there grew that nameless tree from the top of Whirl Hill, which Mary had called by one name, Mr. Evans by another, and Mad Bet by another. And Persephone suddenly saw the girls turned towards this tree, and lifting up their hands, began chanting something to it. What they chanted was pure gibberish, but Persephone, when she awoke, remembered the gibberish, which was as follows: Dominus, Glominus, sow your seed, sow your seed, sow your seed. Glominus, Dominus, rain and dew, rain and dew, rain and dew. We, your servants, will make your bed, make your bed, make your bed, some at the foot and some at the head. But which of us lies besides you? This gibberish was doubtless recalled from some ancient childish jingle, repeated in one of those immemorial games that little girls love to play together, during which they take one another's hands and advance and retreat in dancing movements that are as mysterious to any casual onlooker as the fantastic words that accompany them. But though recalled to the mind of Persephone from some half-forgotten game of her childhood, there doubtless were words added to it in her dream that could hardly have been present in the original version, and which were certainly more suitable to the nature of this wild night of brackish-smelling Wessex wind than to any harmless ring of roses danced upon a Norfolk lawn. The curious thing was that in Persephone's own mind, as she dreamed this dream, there occurred one of those confused metamorphoses which so often make dreams so bewildered and misleading. The confusion, namely, of this ambiguous tree with a cross. The mayor of Glastonbury's dreams on the 10th of December were full of instances of nightmarish mingling of his daughter Crummie with Merlin's fatal Ninue, and both Ninue and Crummie with Lady Rachel Zoyland. Nor were the dreams of the vicar of Glastonbury less disturbing. Matt Decker dreamed that he was visiting Nell Zoyland at the hospital, where he had, as a matter of fact, visited her already 3 times, and that he was giving her the Blessed Sacrament, a thing he had often longed to do, but had never dared to suggest doing. He was of the point of raising the cup to her lips when it grew so heavy in his hands that he could scarcely lift it. The cup, in fact, transformed itself into Mother-like silver bowl, or rather Kitty Camel's silver bowl, with which, of course, Matt Decker had been familiar before it passed into the present owner's possession. Whiter and whiter grew the sacramental cup as the priest struggled with it in his dreams. I must hold it tight, he thought. I must press it against me. And then there happened a metamorphosis similar to the one that had occurred in Percy's dream, only in the reversed order. For, while with Percy the tree turned into the cross, with Matt Decker the Grail turned into Nell Zoyland. So deep had been the wrestling of this man's majestic character with his passion for this girl, that until tonight, even in his dreams, he had resisted temptation. But tonight there happened in him one of those occasions which grew great creative nature manages to outwit the strongest self-control. Nature achieved her end by lodging in Matt Decker's mind the feeling that at all costs he must hold this white bowl firm and tight against him, so that it should not spill a drop of Christ's blood. But as he held it in his dreams, and as it became the body of the girl, he so terribly desired, nature managed to so numb, drug, dull, confuse, cloud, hypnotize, paralyze, and otherwise metagrabalize Matt Decker's implacable conscience that it allowed him to give way with good heart to a spasm of such exquisite love-making that it was, to the poor aesthetic priest, like the opening of the gates of heaven. Little did Elfin Cantle know, as he clutched his father's old stable coat, now his own bed cover, tighter and tighter around him as his turret's window, that the psychic current of his wrath against the Glastonbury superstition was aided by the austere dream gesture of Dave's spear from another quarter of the old tavern. Dave's thoughts, before he had gone to sleep that night, had been calm and peaceful. He had dined with his wife at Dickory Cantle's old-fashioned ordinary in the tavern parlor, and Percy had listened so sweetly to his stories about their Bristol comrades that he had been tempted to reveal to her the great scheme he had now on foot. Where communism was concerned, however, Dave was a man of iron. In spite of the fact that their whole plan was originally her own inspiration, he had thought it wiser, as it certainly was, to hold his tongue over all that. But to all that he did allow to pass, in the expressive Homeric phrase, the barrier of his teeth, Percy had listened with music more than her usual attention, with much more than her usual attention. Something in the rising wind had roused her feelings to a pitch of impersonal tenderness, and her husband happened, by a good luck, to be the beneficiary of this good, soft mood. But once asleep, Dave's mind reverted to his great conspiracy, and the crying of the wind in his chimney and the flapping of the blinds in his window worked into his dreams and made them as disturbed as Percy's own, but of a different issue. For the walls of his real commune rose up in Dave's dreams as that wild wind, blowing out of Wales, made the historic houses about him creak and groan through all its ancient beams and rafters. Thus had it groaned when the emissaries of Henry haunted out of its seclusion the last faithful servants of the abbey. Thus had it groaned when the spies of James dragged forth the unhappy preachers who had supported Monmouth. The whole conflicting tenor of Dave Spear's life struggle with himself would have been revealed had his dreams been written down. For the sake of the future, he kept muttering, when, as dictator of his commune, he gave orders for the abbey ruins to be destroyed and the mayor's new buildings to be leveled within the ground. Clean and fresh rose in his dreams the new Ynis Withrin, founded this time not in the tricks of kings and priests, but on the equal labors and rewards of working men. For the sake of the future, he cried in his sleep as he watched the destruction of shrine after shrine. But if Dave's dreams that night were drastic, the conduct of his fellow conspirator, Red Robinson, who was awake and drinking and making love, in complete imperviousness to his mystical procession of bodiless shapes, was neither very drastic nor very brave. Red had persuaded Sally Jones to sit up with him after closing hours in the back parlors of St. Michael's Inn. This was a proceeding that would have got the good-natured landlord into trouble had it been discovered, but Red had grown so tired of his miserably hurried interviews with the girl in her mother's home and in his mother's home, after a day's work of the girds, that he had broken away from his usual caution. Sally, who had a latchkey of her own, would just have to tell her mother that Miss Cordelia had kept her late that day to help with the preparations for her wedding. They decided that it was best that a Sally would, when she left St. Michael's near midnight, should walk home alone and shouldn't even make a short detour so as to approach her home from the direction of the Girds. Neighbors be such ones for noticing things, she had said, and 'tis no good to start a lot of talk when there be no cause for talk. To this sentiment Mr. Robinson had given a cordial assent. He found himself, as a matter of fact, extremely comfortable in this little, seldom used inn parlor, with a bottle of gin unfinished on the table and a good fire in the grate. The old lady of the house, Mad Bet's aunt, had been friendly to the Robinsons ever since, owing to Mrs. Robinson's employment in the palace at Wells. They had first settled in Glastonbury. This friendliness, such as in the importance of small matters in small towns, was due to the fact that Mad Bet aunt had a sister who had married a man down Richmond Way. The man was long dead, and so was the sister, but the accent of the Robinsons pleased the landlady. "The way you folks talks," she said, "do mind me of sister's husband." Well, that's Glastonbury for tonight. Today, whatever. Till next time. Cheers.